I don't care how old you are. Nothing prepares you for the moment your own mother looks you in the eye and tells you not to come home for Christmas. No softened tone, no excuses, just ice. Don't come for Christmas, she said, folding towels at the kitchen counter like she wasn't tearing a hole through my chest. Your sister's boyfriend will be here. He's from a different class. I wish I could say I was surprised. But when your entire childhood is a never-ending Olympics of, why can't you be more like your sister? You stop expecting warmth. You learn to carry your own. My name's Alex. I'm 32, work in tech, specifically cybersecurity, and I live about 5 hours away from my hometown. I haven't lived there since college, and I haven't wanted to since high school. But I still tried. For years. Tried to be the good son, the peacemaker, the one who sent cards, called on birthdays, offered help without being asked. But when you're the family scapegoat, none of that sticks. You're always just one moment away from being too much or not enough. My younger sister, Ava, is 29. If I'm the invisible sun, she's the golden spotlight. Always has been. She could spill red wine on the carpet and blame it on the dog, and my parents would thank her for being honest. I once came home 5 minutes late from school, and they threatened to ground me for a week. Anyway, back to the call. It was a Tuesday. Cold. I was stirring pasta on the stove when Mom called out of the blue. No, how's work? No, how have you been? Just that cold little sentence, tossed out like she was telling me to grab milk from the store. I paused, blinking at the bubbling water like it might offer some answers. Excuse me, I said, trying to keep my voice even. You don't want me to come home for Christmas? She sighed, like I was already making things difficult. It's not that we don't want you to. It's just, well, Ava's boyfriend will be here. You know, he's very successful. Very refined. We don't want to make things awkward. That was the first cut. And then Dad took the knife and twisted it. He's from a different class, son, he said, as if that made it any better. We don't want to embarrass ourselves. I almost laughed. Embarrass ourselves? Who's we? Because I've been working for a Fortune 500 company for 8 years. I live in a decent condo. I pay my taxes. I keep my head down. I don't smoke. I don't drink to excess. I don't even raise my voice. I've made something of myself with no help from them. But to my parents, I've always been the placeholder kid. The spare. You're not serious, I said, my hand tightening around the wooden spoon. You're uninviting me from Christmas because Ava's boyfriend might not like me? And that's when Ava chimed in. She must have been on speaker because I hadn't heard her voice until then. She gave this little snort, then said, he doesn't like being around nobodies. There was a beat of silence. My ears rang. My face flushed hot. That one landed. Not because I believed her, but because it confirmed everything I'd always suspected. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as furniture. Background. A name they were obligated to mention on holidays, but not someone they were proud to know. A nobody. I ended the call quickly after that. Told them I'd think about it, even though I already knew what I was going to do. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to push down that familiar cocktail of anger, sadness, and bitter disappointment. I thought about all the birthdays I'd called on, all the gifts I'd sent, all the times I showed up, only to be treated like an afterthought. I thought about how my mom once cried at Ava's law school graduation, while mine passed with barely a blink. How Dad introduced Ava's old boyfriends as future leaders, but never once asked what I did at work. I thought about the time I fixed their Wi-Fi remotely during a family dinner and no one said thank you. And now they didn't want me there. Because Ava had a new trophy boyfriend. Because I didn't fit the image. Because, apparently, I was just too embarrassing. That's when I made my decision. I was going home for Christmas. Not out of spite. Not even out of some desperate need to belong. But because I was done pretending that being quiet and agreeable made me invisible. I wasn't going to let them erase me from my own family. And if this boyfriend was as high and mighty as they claimed, I was curious. Curious to see who this man was that made them toss me aside like that. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what happened when I walked into that living room. Because the moment he saw me, his face went pale. His mouth parted slightly, eyes wide. And then, in a stunned voice that cut through the Christmas music and clinking silverware, he said, "Boss, what are you doing here?" And just like that, the room went silent. Everything stopped. Ava's smirk vanished. My dad blinked like someone had unplugged him. My mom's wine glass tilted in her hand. And I just stood there in the doorway, coat still on, snow melting off my boots, watching the pieces fall into place. Because that was the moment I knew. This Christmas was going to be very different. I didn't speak right away. I just stood there, holding my overnight bag in one hand, letting the silence stretch long enough to make it uncomfortable. He'd called me boss. That wasn't some mistaken identity thing. It wasn't bro or man or any of those throwaway greetings. It was the kind of word that slams the brakes on a conversation. My mom blinked first. Wait, what did you just call him? She asked, eyebrows knitting together as she glanced between me and Ava's boyfriend like she'd misheard. The boyfriend, his name was Ethan, by the way, stammered. I mean, Mr. Weston. Alex, sir, I didn't know you were, related. I had no idea. He was practically tripping over himself, that cool confidence from the phone call gone like it had been peeled away with a crowbar. His hands went into his pockets. Out again. Nervous twitch. His gaze dropped to the floor, then flicked to Ava. She looked confused. Like genuinely confused. Like her brain was short-circuiting because the guy she'd bragged about for months just called me his boss. And I knew I could have explained it. I could have dropped the story right there. Told them I was a senior director at CyberCorp, that Ethan was in one of our satellite project teams, that I'd only recently approved the bonus that let him buy the watch I saw gleaming on his wrist, that I'd once personally vouched for him during a rough client audit. But I didn't. Instead, I slowly unzipped my coat, hung it by the door, and walked in like I owned the place. I let the silence do the talking. I brought gifts, I said simply, holding up a wrapped bag with a crisp ribbon on top. Hope that's not a problem. Ethan looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. My mom still hadn't moved from where she stood near the fireplace. My dad glanced at her, then cleared his throat and did that awkward dad nod thing. You didn't say you were coming, son. Didn't I? I asked innocently. I thought I said I'd think about it. You said you wouldn't make things weird, Ava said sharply, stepping forward. You said you'd stay out of it. That was rich. Out of what, exactly? My own family's Christmas? I said I'd think about it. I repeated, now walking toward the living room. And then I thought, what kind of brother would I be if I missed my favorite holiday with my loving family? I made sure to glance at Ethan when I said loving. He flinched like I'd thrown a snowball at him. I took the seat farthest from Ava, by the armchair near the tree. She looked like she wanted to say something else, probably something biting, but Ethan grabbed her wrist gently and shook his head. I didn't miss that. The way he was already trying to cool things down, to make sure no one asked too many questions. He knew. He knew that if the truth got out, it wouldn't just be awkward. It would shatter the image Ava had been selling to our parents. It would flip the script. And they weren't ready for that. Mom finally forced a smile. Well, it's nice of you to bring gifts. I suppose you can stay for dinner. Just, please don't bring up work, okay? We're trying to keep things elegant this year. Elegant. Right. Because I guess that's what we're calling emotional exile now. I didn't argue. I just nodded. Of course. Wouldn't want to embarrass ourselves. Her smile twitched. Dinner wasn't for another hour, so everyone went about their fake small talk, pouring wine, nibbling appetizers, making a show of pretending everything was normal. I sat back and watched the performance. That's when the real fun began. See, every year, my family does this little gift swap game. Everyone draws a number. You pick a gift from the pile or steal one from someone else. Harmless on the surface. Except that for the last 6 years, I've mysteriously pulled the lowest number every single time. Once I got a gas station gift card. Expired. Another year, it was a snow globe that still had the price tag on it. $2.99. And Ava? Oh, she always got the best stuff. Designer scarves. Premium earbuds. Spa gift cards. But I showed up this time with a gift bag that looked suspiciously expensive. Black mat with gold trim, tied tight with real ribbon. I didn't say what was inside. Just placed it dead center in the pile, made sure it caught Ava's eye. She couldn't help herself. When her turn came, she lunged for it. Oh, what's this? She purred, holding it up for everyone to see. This looks fancy. I just sipped my cider. Must be from someone generous. Inside was a high-end skincare set, imported. Boutique stuff, not sold in stores. I'd seen her Instagram story last month whining about not being able to find it anywhere. She lit up like a kid on Christmas. Oh my God, I've been looking for this. Then she turned to Ethan, grinning. Babe, you didn't have to. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, looked at me. I raised my brow. That wasn't from him. She froze. What? I took another slow sip. That was from me. And you could hear the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. Ava laughed, but it was tight. Right? Sure. Like you'd even know what this brand is. I do, I said calmly. Because I pay attention when people I care about say what they want. Even if they think I don't. She stared at me. Eyes narrowed. I could see the thoughts running through her head. She didn't like that. That I'd upstaged Ethan. That I knew her well enough to buy her the things she wanted. And that her boyfriend didn't. I could almost hear her trying to justify it in her head. Maybe he just got lucky. Maybe he's lying. Maybe it's a fake. But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she stood up and announced she was going to get more wine. She didn't come back for 10 minutes. While she was gone, Dad finally leaned toward me. So, how do you know Ethan? He tried to sound casual, like he wasn't dying to know what had just happened. I shrugged. He works for one of our teams. Good guy. Bit green, but smart. Ethan coughed. Alex's team. Well, technically he oversees several divisions now. Mom blinked. Wait, what do you mean overseas? I set my cider down. I'm one of the directors at Cybercore. Have been for 2 years. Got promoted last summer. Dead. Silence. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I let the silence hang there because that's what they always did when Ava accomplished something. But now it was me, and they didn't know how to process it. Oh, my mom finally said. That's surprising. You never mentioned it. You never asked. She flinched. Just a little. Ava returned a few minutes later with a fresh glass of wine and a forced smile. She didn't say anything, but her eyes darted to Ethan, then to me, then back again. You could practically see the wires sparking behind her eyes. The rest of the night was tension wrapped in tinsel. Ava made subtle digs. Some people just fall into promotions these days. Mom changed the subject every time I started to talk. Let's not get too deep into work stuff, okay? We don't want to bore anyone. Dad asked Ethan more questions than he'd ever asked me growing up, even after learning I was his boss. And every time I responded politely, their smiles got just a little tighter. Later, while we were clearing dishes, Ava cornered me in the kitchen. You're enjoying this, aren't you? She hissed. Enjoying what? I asked, loading a plate into the dishwasher. Making everyone feel small. Showing off. I turned to her slowly. I'm not showing off. I'm existing. You just don't like that it doesn't revolve around you this time. Her nostrils flared. You think you're better than us now? I leaned in slightly. No. I think you've always thought you were better than me. And I just stopped agreeing. She didn't have a comeback. And that's when I knew. This wasn't about Ethan. This wasn't even about me. This was about control. For the first time in years, Ava wasn't the center of the story. And she couldn't stand it. But the real twist? It hadn't even dropped yet. Because I hadn't told them why I came back. Not really. And Ethan? He was still hiding something. Something I wasn't sure he wanted my family to know. But I was about to find out. And when I did, it would change everything. Let me tell you something about betrayal. It's never loud. It doesn't always scream, or slam a door, or come with some grand reveal. Sometimes, it walks in wearing a smile. Sometimes, it serves you ham and pours your wine and laughs at your jokes, until you realize the knife's already in your back. After that moment in the kitchen, things didn't immediately spiral. In fact, the house grew quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where people are pretending so hard to be normal that the air hums with it. You could hear the tick of Dad's old wall clock all the way from the den. I went back to the living room and sat down in the armchair, watching the fire dance behind the glass. Mom was straightening throw pillows that didn't need straightening. Dad had pulled Ethan aside, whispering something in low tones, casting furtive glances in my direction. Ava? She was back on her phone, thumbs tapping furiously, probably texting one of her friends about how insufferable I was being. It was Christmas Eve. At some point, Mom brought out dessert, her signature peppermint cheesecake. Normally, I would have looked forward to it, but everything tasted like cardboard now. I pushed it around my plate, offered a few polite bites, and waited. Because something felt off. Ethan wouldn't look me in the eye. Every time I asked him a question, about work, about projects, about his plans, he'd answer in short bursts. Nervous. Like someone who expected a trap. At first, I assumed he was just embarrassed. I mean, he'd been paraded around the family as some hotshot executive, only to discover that his boss was the very guy Ava and my parents had spent years mocking. But this wasn't embarrassment. This was fear, and not the kind you get from awkward social dynamics. This was deeper. I didn't say anything, just filed it away in that mental folder labeled weird things to figure out later. After dinner, the rest of the family disappeared into their usual traditions. Dad watched football. Mom cleaned up obsessively, muttering about crumbs. Ava disappeared into her room, slamming the door loud enough for me to hear from the hallway. I stayed in the guest room. Same one I'd always been assigned. The small one, with the drafty window and a mattress that remembered every argument we ever had in that house. I sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through emails on my work phone when I saw it. A message, timestamped 6:11 p.m. from Ethan. Subject, please don't say anything. I stared at it for a moment, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I opened it. It was short, barely 3 sentences. Alex, I didn't know you were Ava's brother. Please don't mention our project to anyone, especially not her. I can explain. Just not here. Not now. There it was again, that fear. Not embarrassment. Not pride. Fear. And the phrase, our project, made something twist in my stomach. Because the last time I checked, Ethan wasn't assigned to any project with my name on it. Not directly. Not officially. I tapped the screen a few times, pulling up our internal dashboard, filtering through teams, divisions, contractors. His name didn't come up under my unit. Not anymore. That's when I remembered something. 2 months ago, we'd flagged a potential data breach in one of our EU-side client networks. Nothing had come of it, at least, not yet, but one of our junior analysts had mentioned odd access patterns tied to a mid-level developer. A guy bouncing IPs from Berlin to Boston, accessing partitions he wasn't supposed to be near. I hadn't thought about it again. The case had been reassigned. But now, something was clicking. I sent a quick message to my assistant, asking her to flag any old access logs tied to Ethan's employee ID. It was late, so I wasn't expecting a reply, but I had a feeling something was going to come to the surface. The next morning was quiet. Too quiet for Christmas morning in a house that used to erupt with excitement over stocking stuffers. I woke up to find the coffee already brewed, a few half-hearted gifts on the hearth, and Ava sitting on the couch like she hadn't slept. Ethan stood near the tree, arms crossed, face unreadable. My mom turned when she heard me enter. Oh, you're up. No, Merry Christmas. No, did you sleep okay? Just that flat acknowledgement, like I was the last guest at a party no one wanted to throw. I sat down on the armchair, letting the silence settle. Dad cleared his throat. So, we were thinking, maybe you'd want to open your gift first. My eyebrows rose. You got me something? I wasn't being snarky. I was genuinely surprised. Dad gestured toward the tree. Top shelf. Silver paper. I reached for it slowly. It was light. Flat. I peeled back the paper and saw a folder. My heart sank a little. Inside was a printed job listing. Cybercore, our company. One of our junior openings. Highlighted. I looked up. Mom smiled, tight-lipped, like someone proud of their plan. We thought maybe you'd want to reapply through proper channels. With Ethan's help, of course. I blinked. Reapply? To the company, Dad said. You clearly admire Ethan, and we thought, maybe it's time to stop being so prideful and start fresh. I felt my jaw slowly unclench. You think I don't work there? I asked. Ava jumped in. Come on, Alex. Director? That was a bit much, don't you think? We looked it up. There's no mention of you on the executive page. That's when I realized what this was. They thought I'd made it up. All of it. The promotion. The job. The connection to Ethan. They thought I'd lied to make myself look good. I exhaled slowly. So instead of asking me, you just assumed I was pretending. It wouldn't be the first time, Ava muttered. I turned to her sharply. When have I ever? You told people you graduated with honors. We called your school, Alex. You barely scraped by. I stood. My voice was calm. Too calm. I graduated early. And the barely scraped by part? That was because Mom refused to co-sign the final loan. I had to work nights to stay enrolled. My mom scoffed. We didn't want to encourage delusions. You weren't cut out for tech, and you knew it. You were always more of a background player. And there it was. The mask slipped. Background player. That was the word she used when I was 12 and asked why Ava got a solo in the Christmas recital and I didn't. That was the word Dad used when he told me to stay out of family business matters. That was the word they hid behind to justify every slight, every dismissal, every time they chose her over me. I felt my chest tighten. Right, I said. Well, Merry Christmas to me. Ethan finally spoke. Maybe this isn't the right time for this. No, Ava said, standing now too. It is the right time. You've been lording yourself over us for 2 days, acting like you're some kind of success story. But you're not. You're bitter. You're lonely. You show up here, uninvited, ruin everything, and now you're trying to what? Guilt us. I stared at her. I wasn't uninvited. I was disinvited. Remember? She rolled her eyes. Semantics. I couldn't believe it. Even now, after I'd proven my status, after Ethan had called me his boss, they still twisted the story to fit their narrative. Then Ethan's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, glanced at it, and paled. My own phone buzzed at the same time. A message from my assistant. Subject, access logs, confirmed breach. You were right. Cross-referenced Ethan MSID with the flagged logs. Unauthorized access confirmed. 3 separate instances across restricted project partitions. Forwarding everything to legal now. I froze, then slowly turned to Ethan. What's Project Stonewall? I asked. His face went white. What? You accessed it 3 times. Illegally. From an unsecured device. You bounced IPs to cover it, but you left a signature. Ava looked between us. What are you talking about? I turned to her, voice cool as frost. Your boyfriend's been stealing proprietary data. That's when it shattered. Ethan stepped back. I didn't. It wasn't. Look, I didn't know it was restricted. You didn't know? I said, crossing my arms. Funny. You signed the NDA. Mom looked stunned. There must be some mistake. I shook my head. There's no mistake. He used your Wi-Fi. From this house. The first breach happened 2 nights after he first visited. He's been using you. No. Ava. I swear. Ethan reached for her. She slapped his hand away. You used me. I thought he was bluffing. Ethan said, eyes still on me. I thought you didn't know. You thought I was a nobody. I replied, echoing her words. Ava stepped back, arms crossed tight across her chest. Get out. Ethan turned to her. What? I said get out, she snapped. I don't care where you go. Just leave. He looked to my parents, but they offered no lifeline. No one said a word as he gathered his coat and practically sprinted out the front door, slamming it behind him. The silence left in his wake was deafening. My mom turned to me, eyes wide. You knew all along? I stared at her. I didn't. But I found out. Because I pay attention. Because I give a damn. Unlike you. And then I saw it. For the first time in my life, they looked afraid of me. Not because I was yelling. Not because I had power. But because, in that moment, they realized just how badly they'd underestimated me. And I wasn't done yet. The silence after Ethan left wasn't satisfying. It wasn't triumphant. It was heavy. The kind of silence that seeps into the walls. No one spoke for a long time. Not even me. Not at first. I just stood there, staring at the door that had slammed shut behind him. Part of me expected someone, anyone, to break the tension. Maybe Ava would finally admit she'd known something was off. Maybe Mom would rush to defend her golden girl, spin the narrative again, claim I had embarrassed them somehow by exposing Ethan's betrayal. Maybe Dad would try to play referee, like he always did. But instead, they all just stood still. 3 statues in a cold room. I could feel the weight in the pit of my stomach. Not because Ethan was gone. He was a parasite. I didn't feel sorry for him. I felt empty. Because deep down, a small, stubborn part of me had hoped this would change something. I'd thought, for one naive moment, that exposing the truth might finally force them to see me. Not as the black sheep. Not as the second-rate kid. But as someone with worth. Someone they could respect. But instead, they looked uncomfortable. Not sorry. Not reflective. Just inconvenienced. Ava broke first. She turned, stormed into the kitchen, and I heard the unmistakable slam of a cabinet door. Mom followed her, muttering, "We'll talk later, sweetheart," before disappearing into the kitchen too. Only Dad stayed in the room with me. He sat on the couch slowly, like his body had aged 10 years in the last hour. I glanced at him, expecting him to speak. He didn't. I waited. Still nothing. Finally, I sat across from him, the old coffee table between us like a neutral zone. I didn't come here to humiliate anyone, I said, voice low. Dad didn't look up. You didn't have to. I blinked. Excuse me. He rubbed his face with both hands, then leaned back with a sigh. You could have called us ahead of time. You could have told us who you were to him. You let it happen like that, in front of everyone. I stared at him, trying to process what I was hearing. You're blaming me for how he reacted to me being here. I'm saying, he said carefully, that you let it play out for drama. I laughed. quietly, bitterly. Dad, you told me not to come because I was a nobody. You said you didn't want to embarrass yourselves. And now I'm the one who stirred up drama. He flinched, just a bit. That was your mother speaking. You agreed with her. He didn't reply. I leaned back in the chair, the leather creaking under my weight. You know what hurts the most? It's not that you didn't know what I've done with my life. It's that you didn't care enough to find out. All these years. You never once asked. That's not fair, he muttered. Isn't it? I asked. You knew what Ava ate for lunch last week, but you didn't even know what city I lived in until last year. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I nodded slowly. Yeah, that's what I thought. He stood up, like he couldn't take the discomfort anymore. I think we all need to cool off. Sure, I said. Cool off from what? Me existing. He didn't answer, just walked away, leaving me alone in that dim, flickering room. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't rock bottom because of Ethan. It wasn't even about the argument. This was rock bottom because I had finally run out of excuses for them. I couldn't pretend anymore. Couldn't rationalize their behavior. Couldn't tell myself that maybe, someday, they'd change. They wouldn't. And that realization settled over me like wet cement. I spent the rest of the night in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. I heard snippets of conversation downstairs. Mom consoling Ava, Dad muttering something about just letting it blow over. But no one came to check on me. No one knocked. No one offered so much as a word of acknowledgement. By morning, I had made my decision. I wasn't staying through Christmas Day. I packed quietly, folded my few clothes, zipped my bag, and took one last look around the room. The faded posters from my teenage years were still on the wall, curling at the edges. The old bookshelf held a few of my childhood paperbacks, untouched, forgotten. It was like a museum of a person they didn't care to remember. As I crept down the stairs, I saw Ava sitting at the kitchen island, phone in one hand, coffee in the other. She didn't look up. Mom was at the stove, cooking breakfast. The smell of eggs and bacon filled the air, warm and familiar. She glanced over her shoulder as I reached the bottom step. Oh, she said. You're leaving? I paused. Yeah. She turned back to the stove. Well, at least take some food before you go. No sense driving hungry. I shook my head. I'm good. She didn't argue. Just flipped a strip of bacon. That was it. No apology. No reflection. Just passive dismissal, like I was a guest who'd overstayed. I stepped into the foyer and grabbed my coat. As I reached for the doorknob, Ava's voice floated from behind me. So that's it. You're just going to leave? After coming in here and tearing everything apart. I turned slowly. You mean after being told I wasn't welcome? After you and Mom made it clear I was an embarrassment? She stood, crossing her arms. Don't twist this. You wanted to feel important. You made Ethan squirm just to prove a point. And now you're bailing because no one clapped for you. I looked at her for a long moment. I'm not bailing, I said. I'm walking away. There's a difference. She snorted. Right. Walk away and play the victim. Like always. No, I said quietly. Not a victim. Just done. And with that, I opened the door and stepped into the cold. The snow had stopped sometime during the night. Everything was quiet. Still, the world looked clean, like nothing bad had ever happened in it. But inside me, there was a storm. I drove in silence for 2 hours before pulling off at a rest stop, hands gripping the wheel tighter than I realized. My phone buzzed with a few texts, generic Merry Christmas messages from colleagues, a couple of work emails, a spam notification from some app one didn't remember installing. Nothing from my family. I sat in that car for a long time, engine off, heat fading, just breathing, trying to figure out what came next. And that's when the idea began to take shape. At first, it was just a spark, a flicker of something. Not revenge. Not exactly. But clarity. For years, I'd poured into people who saw me as disposable. I bent over backwards to earn approval from people who saw love as a transaction. And where had it gotten me? Alone. Angry. Exhausted. No more. If I was going to give my time, my energy, my presence, it would be to people who deserved it. And if they thought I was just a background player, fine. Then it was time to write a new script. One where I stopped asking for a seat at their table and started building my own. But first, I needed to tie up some loose ends. Because there was still one thing left to do. And it involved Ethan. It's strange how clear everything becomes once you stop begging to be seen. Driving back to the city that morning felt different. Lighter. Not because I wasn't hurt. Don't get me wrong, I was. But because for the first time in years, I wasn't carrying around this twisted hope that maybe my family would change. That maybe, if I just achieved one more thing, they'd finally clap. Finally say the words I'd been aching to hear since I was a kid. "We're proud of you." They weren't going to say it. And that was okay, because I didn't need their validation anymore. What I did need, though, was to set things right where it counted. The minute I got back into my apartment, I turned on every screen. Dual monitors, company laptop, even the extra display I usually used for coding sprints. I logged into the internal portal, accessed the security dashboard, and pulled up every file tied to Ethan's ID. I cross-referenced dates, device signatures, metadata, the works. 3 unauthorized access points confirmed. One of them was traced to an encrypted personal drive that had since gone offline. If I hadn't shown up for Christmas, Ethan might have gotten away with it. I called our legal team the next day. "Do we have enough to move forward?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Easily," said Nadine, the company's legal lead. "Frankly, I'm surprised he wasn't caught sooner. He got lucky. I got unlucky." "You're not going to press criminal charges?" "Not yet," I said. "But I want him gone. Officially. Quietly. And I want a clause added to his exit paperwork barring him from discussing company intel, or me, under NDA terms. Already drafted. We'll push it through tomorrow." That was the first domino. The second was the email I sent to my division heads later that afternoon. A full transparency memo detailing the breach, the quick response, and the systems we'd reinforced as a result. I didn't name Ethan directly, but I didn't have to. The point was to show leadership, accountability, control. I signed it with my full name and title. Alex Weston, Senior Director of Information Security, Cybercore Inc. By the end of the week, I had 3 congratulatory emails from upper management, a quiet thank you from the CEO, and a personal message from a board member saying they appreciated my decisive handling. The part that really got me? They weren't surprised. No one was shocked that I'd handled it well. No one asked, "Wait, you're that Alex Weston?" Because to them, I'd always been someone with value. Someone they saw. Someone whose seat at the table was never in question. The more I sat with that, the more I realized how much I'd been starving for recognition from the wrong people. It wasn't just about family. It was a pattern. I kept offering my energy to places where it evaporated on impact. So I stopped. I started going to dinner with coworkers I'd been brushing off for years. I reconnected with my college friend Jason, who now ran a startup in Austin. We talked about collaboration, about equity, about building something real from the ground up. I didn't commit to anything yet, but for the first time in a long time, I felt excited about possibilities that didn't revolve around impressing anyone. And maybe the biggest shift? I began saying no. No to working weekends out of guilt. No to explaining myself to people who weren't listening. No to dragging dead weight behind me just because it shared my last name. 2 weeks after I returned from that Christmas disaster, I got a call from my mom. I stared at the screen for a long moment. It was the first time she'd called me since that morning. No texts. No check-ins. Just silence. I could have let it ring. I wanted to let it ring. But part of me needed to hear what she'd say. I answered. "Alex," she said, "your sister's been very upset." Of course. Not "how are you?" Not "we've been thinking about you." Just straight to the crisis. "I'm sure she has," I replied calmly. She said Ethan's company reached out to her. "He's been blacklisted from a few places. She thinks it's your doing." "It's not," I said truthfully. "His own actions did that. I just reported the facts." There was a pause. "I just wish you hadn't done all of that in front of us." I couldn't help but laugh, bitter and low. "So let me get this straight. You're not angry that he stole confidential data. You're angry that I exposed it in your house." "We're not saying you were wrong," she said quickly. "Just that it could have been handled with a bit more grace." I felt something click into place inside me. A kind of closure I hadn't known I needed. "You only call when you want something," I said. "You called to uninvite me from Christmas. You didn't call to apologize after everything happened. You didn't check on me. But now that Ava's hurting, suddenly I matter." "That's not true." "It is. And I'm not angry about it anymore. But I see it now. Alex, I'll always be your son. But I'm done fighting for a role in your play. I have my own story now." She didn't speak, just let out a breath that almost sounded like disappointment. But I wasn't disappointed. Not anymore. I was done performing. I hung up gently, not in anger, just, finally, in peace. And that's when the third domino fell. A week later, I was invited to present at a cybersecurity summit in DC. One of the keynote panels had dropped the speaker last minute, and the organizers had heard about the Ethan breach. They wanted someone with experience, with poise, someone who could talk about internal security vulnerabilities and leadership under pressure. I said yes. The talk went well. Really well. Standing ovation. Someone from the Department of Defense asked for my card. Another guy from a think tank said he wanted to put me in touch with a venture firm looking for CTO candidates. When I got back to my hotel room that night, I stared out the window at the glowing skyline, still wearing my badge lanyard. And I realized, this was it. This was the rise. Not because I was on stage, not because of the applause, but because I didn't need anyone to validate it. I didn't take a picture. I didn't post about it. I didn't text my parents. It was mine. All of it. And I knew, really knew, that I was never going to be the background player again. But as with all stories, even rises have shadows. Because when I finally did hear from Ava again, she didn't call to apologize. She called to blame me. And what she said changed everything. When Ava finally called, her voice didn't crack. No tearful apology. No reflection. Just raw, simmering resentment. I was in my office at the time, late evening, the city skyline flickering behind the floor-to-ceiling windows. It had been a long day, conference debriefs, internal restructuring, and a budget approval that finally freed up 2 new hires I'd been pushing for since Q2. I had just settled into my chair with a fresh cup of coffee when my personal phone rang. Her name lit up the screen like a warning flare. I considered letting it go to voicemail. Honestly, I wanted to, but something in my gut told me to answer. I tapped the screen, lifted the phone to my ear. "Alex," she snapped. "What did you do?" I didn't answer right away. Just let the silence stretch. She hated that. "What are you talking about?" I asked finally. "Ethan," she bit out. "He's being investigated. By Interpol." That got my attention. Interpol. I repeated slowly, brows drawing together. Yes. Something about European data laws. Cross-border compliance. You started this. I reported internal breaches, I said calmly. That's it. If he crossed into international territory, that's on him. You ruined his life, she hissed. I almost laughed. I ruined his life. I said, sitting up straighter. Ava, he was using you. He accessed confidential networks under your roof. He tried to siphon client IP. This wasn't some misunderstanding. He was committing fraud. You're lucky your name wasn't on any of it. That silenced her. For a moment. Then she said something I didn't expect. I know he messed up, but he was going to fix it. I blinked. Fix it? By what? Returning the stolen data and asking for a do-over. He told me you were planning to leave Cybercore, she said, voice dropping slightly. That you were burnt out. That you were considering starting something smaller. A consultancy. I stiffened. Because I had talked about that. To a few people. Quietly. Over lunch. Late-night planning sessions. It wasn't public knowledge yet. Not even formalized. How did he know that? I asked, ice creeping into my tone. She didn't respond. Ava, I said more firmly. How did Ethan know about my exit plans? He saw something, she said eventually. On your laptop. When you came home last year for Thanksgiving. I closed my eyes. He'd snooped. Of course he had. I let my guard down. Left a folder open. Maybe a Slack tab. Maybe a draft of the proposal Jason and I had been sketching together. And Ethan, nosy, opportunistic Ethan, had seen it. Copied it. Maybe more. I didn't know he took anything, Ava said defensively, clearly sensing the shift in my breathing. I just thought he was curious. I exhaled slowly. Did he take any files? Notes? Anything tied to the proposal? She hesitated. Too long. Ava. There was a folder, she said. He had it saved under a different name. He said it was nothing serious. I didn't look. I felt the anger rise, slow and heavy. Not the volatile kind. Not the yelling kind. The cold kind. The kind that settles into your bones and waits. I ended the call without another word. And just like that, the setup was clear. Ethan hadn't just stolen company data. He'd stolen my ideas. My framework. My plan for walking away clean and building something new. And he'd probably try to shop it around. Maybe even to competitors. Maybe Ava helped. Maybe she didn't. But it didn't matter. Because now it was personal. Over the next week, I worked like a ghost. Quiet. Focused. Precise. By day, I did my usual work. Pipeline reviews, internal audits, onboarding security analysts. By night, I reconstructed every piece of the stolen project. The proposal, the code architecture, the pitch decks. I dug into server logs, email metadata, Slack backups. I found the folder Ethan had renamed and flagged it with a digital watermark, something unique I'd coded years ago to track intellectual property, hidden inside the footer of the doc, invisible to the eye. Then I filed an internal report with the executive team, flagging a potential theft of proprietary concept materials. Within hours, legal called me. You're saying someone attempted to lift the core framework for a spin-off consultancy? Correct. And it's your original material? Check the metadata, I said. Timestamps don't lie. Neither does my signature hash. The next morning, they launched an internal task force, confidential, limited to 4 people, all trusted. HR looped in, under strict non-disclosure. Ethan's name came up immediately. But here's where it gets interesting. While tracing the external movement of those files, our forensic analyst discovered 2 outbound transfers. One went to a private Gmail account registered to Ethan. The other? To a corporate address tied to a rival firm, a small security startup called Larkbridge Solutions. And the founder of that firm? Jason, my friend. The one I'd been having those casual brainstorming lunches with. The one I'd shared early drafts with. I sat at my desk for a long time after that, replaying conversations, pauses, questions he'd asked that, in hindsight, felt too specific. Moments I'd brushed off as natural curiosity. Compliments that now felt like cover. He'd gone behind my back, used Ethan as a bridge, and I'd been too comfortable to notice. It hit me like a brick to the chest. But it didn't break me. It focused me, because now I had everything I needed. Ethan had stolen internal data, violated corporate NDA, and leaked confidential material to an outside firm. Jason had accepted it, folded it into his own roadmap, and begun quietly building his version of my dream. But they didn't know what I knew. They didn't know the watermark was embedded, that I had proof, that I had witnesses, that I had full access to every system that mattered. And best of all, they didn't know that CyberCore executive team had already offered me a private equity fund to build a partnered spinoff, with full legal backing and seed capital, if I wanted to go solo. I hadn't accepted yet, but now, I was ready, because it wasn't just about building something new anymore. It was about making sure the people who tried to use me as a stepping stone realized just how far below me they really stood. The rise wasn't about getting even. It was about proving, quietly, ruthlessly, definitively, that I wasn't someone you could dismiss, ignore, or steal from. I was done asking for a seat. I was about to flip the whole damn table. And Ava? She had no idea the part she played. But she'd learn soon enough. Because when I made my move, it wasn't just going to shake Ethan or Jason. It was going to send shockwaves through everyone who ever thought I was the background player. Revenge isn't loud. That's what people get wrong. They think it's some explosive moment, a shouting match, a slammed door, a dramatic confrontation in front of an audience. But real revenge, the kind that actually lands, is quiet. It's precise. It's a scalpel, not a hammer. And I've been sharpening mine for weeks. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not my coworkers, not my assistant, not even the few friends who still asked about my family from time to time. Every move I made was calculated, controlled, and executed under strict legal advisement. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. The first step? Documentation. I compiled everything. Every timestamp. Every stolen file. Every Slack message and email thread that proved I'd originated the proposal Ethan and Jason had tried to repurpose. The server logs showing the IP addresses. The metadata from the stolen pitch decks. The hash signature embedded in the footer code. All of it. I packaged it into a secure report, complete with legal summaries, and submitted it to CyberCore executive legal team. They didn't ask questions. They didn't need to. The evidence was overwhelming. 2 days later, I received an encrypted email from Nadine, our head of legal. Full internal review complete. Action recommended. NDA enforcement, cease and desist order to Larkbridge Solutions, and termination of all involved internal actors. It was already in motion, but I wasn't finished. Because this wasn't just about holding Ethan accountable anymore. It was about making sure Jason felt the weight of what he'd done. So I made a phone call. To a client. A very large one. See, one of the reasons CyberCore had kept me around for so long, beyond my work ethic and spotless record, was because I was what you might call client sticky. Meaning, when I moved, my clients followed. Especially the big ones. And Jason? His little startup had just landed a contract with one of my legacy accounts, a Fortune 100 bank. And what Jason didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that I still had an active oversight clause tied to their cybersecurity roadmap, which meant I had final say on all third-party integrations touching that account. I scheduled a meeting. The call was brief. "Hi, this is Alex Weston. Just a heads up, there's an IP conflict of interest involving your new vendor, Larkbridge. I'd recommend putting that partnership on pause until legal finishes their review. No further comment for now." That was it. 10 seconds. 48 hours later, Larkbridge's contract was frozen. And Jason? Well, he called me. Of course he did. He left a voicemail first, light tone, fake concern, asking if there'd been some confusion or miscommunication. Then another, slightly less polite, reminding me how close we used to be and how we could work this out like adults. I didn't respond. 3 days later, I got an email from his CTO. "We understand there may have been some overlap between early concept materials. Please advise how we can resolve this amicably." Translation: "We got caught. Please don't destroy us." But I wasn't done. Because just as the legal orders went out and Larkbridge scrambled to halt development on a stolen roadmap, Cybercore announced a new initiative, an elite, internal innovation incubator for next-gen security models. Guess who was named director? Yours truly. And guess what the first project was? A fully funded spin-off company using the exact framework Ethan and Jason had tried to lift. My framework, my rules, my equity. Within a week, I had a new office, a new team, and full autonomy to build what I'd originally dreamed of, except now, I didn't have to bootstrap it. I had resources. I had backing. I had the legal blessing of a $5 billion company watching my six. And Ethan? He signed his NDA and exit agreement under pressure of pending criminal charges. We didn't prosecute, for now, but his career in tech was effectively over. Blacklisted from half the industry. The other half didn't want to touch him once the word spread. He tried to contact Ava again. She ignored him. At least, that's what she claimed when she texted me 2 weeks later with a very long, very dramatic message. "I didn't know he stole from you. I didn't know he used me. I was just trying to keep the peace. You've always been distant, Alex, and I didn't know how to fix it." I stared at that message for a long time. I could have said a lot of things. Could have pointed out that she never once called me when I got promoted. That she never invited me to her birthday parties or shared my wins with the family. That every time I tried to connect, she shut me down with a smirk and a passive-aggressive jab. But instead, I replied, "I'm not distant. I'm just done begging." She didn't respond. Neither did my parents when they found out what happened. Word traveled fast once Ava cracked and told them. I never heard from Mom. Not once. No apology. No reflection. Dad sent a one-line email. "I hope this power trip was worth it." I laughed when I read that. Because it wasn't a power trip. It was just a correction. A quiet one. A necessary one. And now? Now my life is clean. Quiet. Focused. Mine. The company I built is thriving. We've secured 2 major clients, hired a team of engineers I trust with my life, and are developing a suite of tools that I know will shape the industry. No Ethan. No Jason. No Ava. Just me. And for the first time in years, I don't feel small. I don't feel invisible. I feel free. And the best part? I didn't burn a single bridge. I just made sure they could never cross mine again. Fallout always arrives after the fire. Quiet at first, like distant thunder. Then it rolls in, ash thick in the air, the full weight of everything scorched finally settling onto the shoulders of those who thought they were safe. That January was the coldest I could remember. Maybe not by the weather forecast, but by the messages. The silence. The strange, awkward texts that started trickling in, not just from Ava, but from people I hadn't heard from in years. Family friends. Distant cousins. Even one of my mom's old book club ladies. "Hey, just heard about everything. I always knew you were smart. Your mom is still trying to understand how it all happened. Are you going to press charges? You could, right?" Somewhere in that noise was a strange kind of justice. Not revenge, not satisfaction, but validation. And it didn't come with applause or celebration. It came with confused whispers, with stammering questions, with people finally seeing what I'd been screaming silently for decades, that I was not the forgettable one. The first real fallout came when Larkbridge collapsed. It didn't happen overnight. Startups rarely do. They limp, slowly, painfully, with funding rounds drying up like puddles in the sun. Jason had tried to pivot after the cease and desist hit his inbox, but by then, the damage was irreversible. His investors pulled out. Half the team quit within 2 weeks. And the client he'd poached, my old legacy account, didn't just terminate their partnership. They blacklisted him across their entire vendor network. The last I heard, Jason had moved to another state, tried rebranding under a different company name. But in tech, especially cybersecurity, your reputation doesn't reset just because your domain name changes. Word spreads, and black marks stick. He sent me an email once. Short, desperate. Let's be honest, this was overkill. I made a mistake. You didn't have to nuke the whole company. I didn't reply, because I didn't nuke anything. I just made sure the right people saw what was already there. That he built his empire on stolen blueprints. That the success he claimed wasn't earned. It was borrowed, repackaged, and sold under a different name. And the market doesn't forgive fakes for long. Then came Ethan. While Lark Bridge disintegrated, Ethan found himself unemployed, disgraced, and flagged on every internal hiring system across the top 50 firms in the sector. Legal kept it civil. We didn't pursue criminal charges because the forensic team agreed there hadn't been actual sales of data, only unauthorized access. But the blacklisting? Permanent. His NDA held. He couldn't speak publicly, couldn't explain his side, couldn't even apply for positions that would require clearance, which was most of the industry. One of my old HR friends sent me a screenshot of a job forum where Ethan had tried to ask, under a fake name, for advice on rebuilding a tech career after a major mistake. Nobody answered. He was done. But the part that surprised me most? Ava. I didn't hear from her again for months. Not until the spring, when I got a small, cream-colored envelope in the mail. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a letter. Neat cursive. Blue ink. Scented faintly like lavender. Alex, I don't expect you to read this. I don't even expect you to care. But I wanted you to hear it from me, not through the family, not filtered through guilt or distance. I didn't know what Ethan was doing. Not fully. Maybe deep down I did, and I just didn't want to admit it, because I was afraid of losing something I could show off. That's what it was. He made me feel like I was winning, like I'd finally chosen someone who made sense to the rest of the world. But he didn't respect me. He didn't even like me. He liked what I represented. Your sister, the golden child. The family who couldn't stop reminding him that he was special. But he wasn't. And when he saw how much power you held, he hated it. And I hated you for it. Because you didn't need our approval. You never did. And that scared me. I wish I could take back the things I said. The nobody comment. The way I laughed when Mom called you dramatic. I wish I'd defended you more. Or at all. You deserved better than the way we treated you. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. If not, I understand. Ava, I read that letter 3 times. Not because I needed an apology, but because I never expected one. I didn't write back. Not because I was angry, but because I was tired. Tired of being asked to come home when it was convenient. Tired of being dragged into their messes. Tired of rebuilding bridges with people who never once laid a plank in my direction. But I did keep the letter. Tucked it in a drawer. Not as a memento of pain, but as proof that even people who live in denial eventually hear the truth echoing through the silence. As for my parents, they took the news as expected. I heard from a distant uncle that Mom was devastated over Ethan. Not because of the stolen data, but because he'd embarrassed the family. Dad still believed I had overreacted and burned every bridge for a power trip. They never called, never wrote, never visited. But I wasn't waiting anymore. The company I built, Stonewall Systems, launched quietly that summer. Our first product rolled out in Q3, a lightweight, end-to-end encryption protocol that undercut industry pricing by 30% while increasing transfer security by 40%. We made headlines. Not splashy, viral ones, but the kind that matter to people who watch, people who lead, people who understand substance over spectacle. I was invited to speak at DEF CON in Vegas. Gave a 25-minute talk on insider threats and ethical exit strategies. Got a standing ovation. Afterward, a college senior came up to me, nervous, fidgeting with the lanyard around her neck. Sorry, she said. I just wanted to say, your talk made me want to keep going. I thought this industry only rewarded the loudest guys in the room. But you showed that strategy and patience still mean something. I thanked her, shook her hand, and on the flight home, I realized something. I'd spent years trying to prove I wasn't the background character. But now, Now I wasn't in the background. I was building the stage, setting the lights, writing the script, and I wasn't doing it to impress anyone. I was doing it for the quiet kids, the underestimated ones, the ones who get told to sit down while their louder siblings take the credit, the ones who work late, bite their tongues, and still get left out of family photos. I was doing it for me. And when I landed, stepped back into my office, and saw my team working late not because they were overworked, but because they believed in the mission, I knew I'd won. Not just the battle, not just the revenge, but the freedom, the life I wanted, on my terms. No more background roles, no more asking to be included. From now on, they'd either make space or watch me build a new room without them.